All right. Hello, everyone. This is webinar number 3 for DerivHack2019. And today we're going to be focusing on deploying on Project DABL. We're going to give you guys an intro on what Project DABL is. And then we're just going to go walk through end-to-end example of deploying an actual app. So just a reminder, this is the last of the 3 webinar series. You guys can find the previous recordings at our blog. Any material that I'll be using here is publicly available on GitHub. The link is shown here. And then please start and watch our repo for any updates and improvements to the examples that we're going to be showing. And feel free to find us on Slack. You have to join the damldrivenslack.com. And then within that, just go to the channel DerivHack2019. And if you're more curious about DABL, we invite you to check out our public roadmap. It's a public Trello board, which I'm going to be showing later in this recording. So I'm just going to kick you off with a general intro to Project DABL. And then for the agenda, we're going to familiarize ourselves for a few minutes with what the actual DABL console is. Then we're going to get to work and create an end-to-end example. We're going to add the UI and automation to that. And then after we pause for a few questions and answers, we're going to be switching context to the Hello CDM example that was shown in the previous webinars, and kind of show you the changes we made in order to be able to work against the local environment but Project DABL as well. So what exactly is Project DABL? Well, we've been communicating it as digital assets ledger as a service cloud offering. It's essentially a dedicated environment with a segregated infrastructure for deployed applications. It's fully compliant with the DABL ledger reference model, so it adheres to any principles that DABL has. And a friendly reminder that it's still in alpha version, but we're working hard to bring new features and make it even more stable than it currently is. But where do we see Project DABL? We actually built it because we want to expedite the time to market for any application. We know that building backends is hard, and in DABL we want to offer all of this with as little code as possible and feature any real-world integration and composable functionality. So our goal is to empower the community of founders to bring destructive, scalable applications to market in the time it takes to build a single website, and with as little code as possible. All right, so let's get started. This is the main Project DABL workspace. As you can see, it has 2 different sections. One is the actual file list that you end up uploading files, which are mostly tar files, compiled DAML code, that is, and any automation. This is compiled as tarballs. On the right-hand side, we actually see the projects and ledgers that we can build. Now, each project can have multiple ledgers. In this one, I've already created the DerivHack project, and I have 3 different ledgers. And I can also, from this main view, I can also see my notifications and have a nice little external link to my documents. So let's go ahead and create a new project. I'm going to name it DABL Webinar. And I'm going to name my ledger Hello DABL. I get a success notification, and my ledger is being built. So as this is baking, let's go ahead and take a look at the DAML model we're going to be deploying to this ledger. I'm going to switch to VS Code. And it's a really simple example. It has only one DAML file, and it has comprised of 2 templates. The first one is a greeter template, and the other one is a hello message template. The greeter template is essentially a template that any party can create and sign for themselves. And it gives them a choice, which is a non-consuming, to say hello to some other party. Now that hello is essentially a non-consuming choice, so we can say as many hellos as we want to a specific party and add a payload, which is kind of which is basically a text message. This is going to create a hello message, which we see here, with a proper sender and recipient and the message. It's obviously signed by the sender party, and it's disclosed to the recipient using DAML's observer keyword. One last thing to mention is that we're also making use of DAML's contract keys here. So we're keying the greeter contract by party. That means that only any single party can create only one of those greeter contracts. Okay, so let's go and build this DAML file into a DAR and upload it in DABL. So I'm also in the same directory, and I'm going to issue a DAML build. And I'm going to output this to my desktop. And I'm going to name it hello DABL.dar. All right, and let's go back to DABL. Load a file. Desktop, I see the DABL.dar just created, and I upload it. All right. Now, I want to actually deploy it to my newly created ledger. I have two options here. Let me dismiss the notifications. I have two options. One of them is to actually use the overflow menu to deploy. But it's actually something even cooler that I could do is I could actually drag and drop the hello DABL.dar in the ledger that I want to deploy it to. I'm going to get another notification. And what actually happens in the background is that this DAR is finding the proper segregated infrastructure. It gets deployed. A few things get initialized, and the ledger is ready for me to use. So if I click inside, I'm presented with the administrator's view of a ledger. Now, this has a few tabs on the side and a few other settings. The first tab that I see is the DAML tab. So I get to see the source code of what I just deployed. In this case, it's a very simple DAML model. It just has only the single file that I mentioned. But if I have multiple DARs deployed, I can see a dropdown as well as a dropdown of my folders and files. Next up is the automation tab. Now, this is the tab where any automation or any bots that I upload for this ledger are gonna show up there. I'm gonna be able to control them from there and also check their logging output. Right now, this tab is not fully functional yet, but we're hard at work to bring it to you guys, hopefully by end of this week. Next up is the live data tab. Now, this is an interesting tab because it shows the active contract set in DABL. It also allows you to add parties to that ledger and add contracts and exercise choices. Although it's not recommended adding contracts or taking choices from this administrative console, it's a nice way of managing everything. Now, I deployed a DAR file, but I already see a party created and a few contracts. And also these contracts that I see, they're not actually any of those DAML templates that I uploaded. So what's going on here? Basically, we in Project DABL are leveraging DAML to use it for our user model. So what you guys are seeing is evidence of deployed DAR file represented as a DAML contract here of a deployed artifact, as well as evidence of a user party on the ledger represented as another DAML contract here. So this user party is for the ledger administrator. Why don't I go ahead and add a couple more parties? I'm going to go here to add party, and I'm going to type in, let's say, let's create Alice. And you guessed it, let's do Bob. All right. So as you can see, while I'm creating parties, new user party contracts get created. Ledger admin is, since they're an administrator, they have an administrator view of the parties that are on the ledger. However, if I actually go to Alice, I can see that Alice can only see her user party contract. This is also one of the DAML privacy features that you get for free. Bob, again, can see their contract. Now, a thing that I want to point out, which is kind of different from anyone that has already used DAML, is that even though we have string literals as Alice and Bob, in DABL, we're actually using party IDs, which are obfuscated names. The mapping between a party ID and a party name, being Bob here, is persisted on those user party contracts. So this is one thing to keep in mind as you guys are developing your apps. Okay, so now as Bob, why don't I go ahead and create one of the contracts from my DAML template? I'm gonna go and add a contract. I'm gonna select the creator who is Bob, and the template who is the which is the sample greeter. I'm gonna hit on next, and as a party, obviously Bob is creating it, so Bob wants to put his name on the contract, so he's able to greet people. Hit submit, and I get a success notification that my contract has been created, but I don't see it here. The reason I don't see it here is that this is not shown to the ledger administrator. But if I go to Bob, I actually see that there's a sample greeter contract here. Now I see my hello choice and an archive choice, which is the default choice on every, one of the default choices on every DAML contract. So let's try and exercise the choice in DABL and say hello to Alice. Click on say hello to party Alice and say hey there. Submit, and we have created a hello message contract that contains the payload message and uses the party sender and recipient as party IDs in DABL. This message, since it's addressed to Alice, is also available for Alice to see. Awesome. So next up, let's take a look at ledger settings. This is the control panel, if you will, for finding all the details of your ledger, the party mappings, and being able to get any information you want in order to connect to this backend. Now, first up, you see the ledger name, the hello DABL that we just created. And then you see a ledger ID, which is again an obfuscated name. Similar to party IDs, DABL uses these ledger IDs for finding and talking to ledgers and parties. Then we have party name to party ID mapping, where you can just select the party, copy, and this was going to copy the party ID. Let me paste it on my terminal so you guys can see. And we also have the functionality for copying JSON web tokens as a specific party. So I can choose the party that I want and hit on copy as and copy this as a JWT token that I can use in my integration. Finally, we offer a convenient way of downloading the entire party mapping set as a CSV file. And we also have a convenient API link on the URL that you need to use in order to connect to this ledger. And we have an administrator action of deleting the entire thing by clicking delete ledger. I'm not going to do that right now. Okay, great. So now that we've seen the administrative panel, let's actually connect to this ledger. We're going to do two things. We're going to start by connecting a UI, and then we're gonna add some automation to it. So let's go on the UI. I'm going to switch back to VS Code, and there is a UI folder. And the thing I need to do before I launch my UI is configure it so it can actually connect to the ledger we just created. I'm going to do two things. One is go to the config file and copy those web tokens for Alice and Bob. I'm going to go back to DABL, copy Alice, switch back, paste the token, then go to Bob, do the same. Great, let me save this. And then the last thing I want is I would like my UI to know the API endpoint of the ledger. So I'm going to go to package.json, and then there's a little proxy setting, which I'm going to fill in with the API. I'm going to copy this, paste it here, save, and now I'm ready to launch my UI. So let me go back to my console, into the UI folder, and do a yarn start. So this is going to launch a development server, which is going to connect to a localhost 3000 and will proxy into the actual DABL ledger. Just give it a few moments until it's initializing. We should be ready to go. Right? So I'm now connected. I'm presented with a login page. We don't check for passwords. We just have to type in either Alice or Bob. Let's go as Alice first. Now, if I log in, I see Alice's contract set as a default page. If you remember, we have a user party for Alice, and we have a hello message that was sent from Bob. Let's drill down and see. The actual hello message is the hey there that we sent, and this is the user party for Alice. Now, if I go to greeter, I see that Alice has no greeter contract created for herself. And in the hello messages, she just has one message being sent to her. If I log out and log in as Bob, now I see 3 contracts because I see the extra greeter contract for Bob. Let me go and check the greeter contract. I do have one, and the messages, I also see the same message that I sent to Alice. So let's send another one from the UI. I'm gonna copy the recipient, paste it on hello, and say, hey there again. Click on say hello. And if I now go to hello messages, I see that I just greeted Alice again. Now, as you obviously noticed, sender and recipient are again party IDs. So if you would like this to show your actual party names, you will need to use that mapping on the front end, which is something that we're not showing here at the moment. But as I created this contract, if I go back to Project DABL and to live data, and let's say as Alice, I obviously see the hello message that I just created from the UI. Great, so now we're essentially sending messages to Alice, but we're not hearing back from Alice. So why don't we go ahead and add a little bot for Alice that is going to respond to Bob's messages. In order to do that, I'm going to first show you how the bot code should look. Go back to VS Code, collapse the UI, and go into the Python folder. Now, if you remember from the last webinar, the bot used to be a file for local development, but now it's an actual directory. The reason is that DABL expects bots to be packaged as Python modules. So this is following the typical module directory structure within an init file, an actual main entry point, and the meat of the code, which is in hellobot.py. Let's briefly look at that hellobot. So the first thing we do is we import the DAZL library. This is a Python library that is talking to the ledger. It's open source and available on our repos. We hard-code the party Alice, and we start with our main function. The first thing we see is the URL that the bot is going to connect to. This is getting read from an environment variable, which is being set at the environment that the bot is deployed. So this is a line that you shouldn't be changing, and you should keep in mind that this environment variable will always be set for you. Next up is the mapping that I was explaining before. we essentially read a CSV file containing the party literal to party ID mappings, and we are creating these maps to translate back and forth between them, because we need not to register the bot as Alice, but to register it as Alice party ID. Next up, we create a ledger client for this party, and we register 2 different callbacks. What the first one does is it fires only once as soon as the ledger is ready. So as soon as the bot is basically caught up with the ledger, that will issue one command, DABL create, and it will create a greeter contract for the party that's running it, in this case, Alice. So this says that as soon as the bot is ready, it will create a greeter contract for itself. And then the second one is going to be listening for hello message contracts. Now, when a contract of this template, of hello message template, has been created, Alice will check if the recipient is her and if the sender is not her. So basically, she will check if this message is addressed to her. And what she's going to do is she's going to fetch her greeter contract using the contract keys. And she's going to exercise the hello choice back to the sender of the original message, saying hello back and echoing the original message. Okay, so before we package this bot up for deployment, there's one last step we need to do, is to update our party map with the proper party IDs. For that, we're going to leverage the setting in ledger settings in DABL. So let me go there. Go to ledger settings and download the party mappings as a CSV. Now I have it in my downloads folder, so let me go ahead and copy it to the proper path. Move it from downloads to the source Python bot. Okay, so now I pasted the fresh party map, and I am ready to package my bot for distribution. Thankfully, I also have a make target to do this bundling, which I'm going to issue right now. And I created the bot as in the target directory. I'm going to move it to desktop so we can see it. So this is the tarball that I just created, and I'm going to move it to the desktop. Great. Go back to DABL and back to my workspace. Upload a file and upload the bot that I just created. Great, I get a success message, and just as I deploy the DAR, I'm going to deploy the bot on the ledger. Drag and drop. I also see a deploying message. Same thing is happening here. The bot gets unpacked. It gets stored in the proper directory, and it gets initialized. So if I go back into my ledger and check the live data, I see that I created a new deployed artifact. If I click on it, this is a Python bot. It gives it a name. And if I go to the automation tab, I can now see the files that I just created. I won't click on those because this link, again, as I said, this automation tab is not fully functional yet, but it will be soon. Another thing that worth seeing is that now that I have a bot deployed, if I go to live data and I go to Alice, I now see that Alice created a greeter contract for herself. So the bot is actually running. It's created a greeter contract and is ready to listen to messages. So why don't I go back to my UI and send a message to Alice, see what happens. So I'm already logged in as Bob. I'm going to copy again the Alice's party ID. I'm going to go to my greeter contract, and I'm going to paste it, and I'm going to ask her if she's a robot. Said hello. Go back to messages. I see my message here. And if I just refresh, I just see an automated response from Alice greeting me back and echoing what I just sent. And that's just as easy as that to deploy automation in DABL and see it in the UI. At this point, I just want to pause for a few moments if there's any questions for the panel. If not, next up, I'm going to be switching context to the Hello CDM example and see like walking you through how what code changes you need to make so it's compatible with both local development and DABL. Okay, so I've been told that all questions have been answered. So let's go straight to Hello CDM. Back to Project DABL. Back to the workspace. Actually, before we go to Hello CDM, how about we show two more things. One is how do we delete ledgers, and what our docs and API looks like. So a few moments. So I've created this ledger that needs deleting. If I go in to the ledger settings, remember the delete ledger button here. So if I click on it, I get a warning, I confirm, and my ledger is gone. Now for the hackathon, you guys can create as many ledgers as you want, but please be mindful of our infrastructure and cost. And we would recommend that any ledger that you're actually not using, you delete. Last but not least is the docs link. If I click on it, this essentially has an overview of how to use the console that I just described. But what I want you to focus on is the API section that mentions all the ready REST API calls that you can make to your newly created ledger and talk to your DABL models directly, just like the UI is doing in this case. Okay, great. So now back to Hello CDM. As you can see here, I already have the DerivHack Hello CDM ledger deployed with automation as well. So let's explore that. As you can see, these are the files that the Hello CDM YAML library has. And this is the main file with transfer contracts. I have, again, Alice and Bob. At this time, I have the transfer contracts created. And I'm also running an automation Python bot for Alice, which is the same as the bot that was shown in webinar number 2. Now, let's get in the code and take a look at what I had to change in order to make this work. Let me collapse the DABL Hello example and go to the Hello CDM example. Remove those files. Okay, so first up is the main function. In the main function, we essentially added a little isLocalDevelopment flag, and we split the endpoint to have a local one and a DABL one. However, we are starting the whole script from a main function that takes some arguments. Let me navigate to that right now, which is here. Now, there's a few flags. The first flag is if we're on local development versus not. If we are not, then DABL is expecting two things. It's expecting the ledger ID to connect to in order to construct the API endpoint, and also the party mapping that you guys saw while connecting to the UI. The first thing we do is, if we're on DABL, we're actually using the DABL endpoint with a ledger ID, and we're creating the party map. The rest of the code is exactly the same as it was on the Hello CDM example running locally. Now, for the API calls, the only thing that has changed is that instead of passing the literal string Alice, we have to pass through the translation step of translating a name to a party, and then passing the party as an owner or as an observer. Same thing with in the reading endpoint and on the exercise choice endpoint. Last but not least, I've written a few translate functions, which are essentially convenience functions of going between party names to parties, vice versa, and fetching tokens given a party or party name. Okay, now for the bot. The bot is a bit more involved. That being said, if you package your bots in the form of a module, you're also going to be able to use them both locally and in DABL. So I strongly recommend you to go that route. As before, there should be an init file and a main entry point file, and then the business logic goes into your bot Python file. This hasn't changed almost at all. The only difference is, again, the local dev flag, which is going to load the party map if it's not on local dev, or it's actually going to use the party literal if it is. For the module, in order to actually package it, we're going to be using Python's source distribution library. Now, this has two more files that you're going to need. The first one is the manifest file, which will be used if you want to pass any extra files within the bundle. This just tells the packaging utility to include the party map within the package so that the bot, when it spins up, it actually can use the translations by reading that CSV. And setup.py file, which names the module, the package. It actually, excuse me, it actually uses the dependency on DAZL. And there's a flag on including package data, which essentially tells the library to look at the manifest file and include anything that it requires. Okay, so let's do this. Let's try and run the main file. I am going to go to the download a fresh party map first, and then go to my console and run this. So I'm on the Hello CDM, Ledger settings. Let me fix this and download a new party map. Okay, and then go to my terminal. Go out of the Hello example and go into the Hello CDM example. And do pip and run Python. And this is going to be under Python main py. And let me use the help argument so we can see what this main is expecting. I'm looking to connect to DABL. Let me actually bring this up so you guys can see better. Okay, so this is expecting a ledger ID and a party map. So I'm gonna go ahead and provide the ledger ID from DABL again by clicking on copy here. And the party map that I just downloaded, so I have it in my downloads folder. If I run this, this does exactly the same thing as was shown in webinar number 2, where it reads JSON, it translates it into DAML JSON, and then it actually sends it to the ledger, reads it back, and exercises a choice on it. And as a last step, let me show you in real time how we package this bot to deploy it to the ledger. So clear my console once again. And if I go to the Python directory and I do a pipenv Python setup.dist, setup.py, and then issue the sdist command. This is a pretty standard stuff for the source distribution Python library. Forgot my one. I end up creating a new file, a tarball, which if I go to my directory here, I can actually see the dist folder, and within this dist, I just created a tar.gz file that I can now also deploy on DABL. And that's about it. So feel free to play with Project DABL. We are here to help you. Again, a friendly reminder, the DABL is stable, but it's still in alpha. So any questions you have, feel free to send them on the Slack channel. And as promised, let me show you our Trello board, which is the public roadmap for Project DABL. This has features that are ready, that are upcoming, and if you like something, you can comment on it so we get it prioritized for you. So feel free to explore this roadmap. Thanks everyone, and good luck with the hackathon.